first lesson, and it probably sounds really funny, anybody who's been in business for a while, is that it just doesn't happen overnight. I remember making my little website. So I did it all by myself to begin with, because I went to a couple of talks and, people like, it doesn't need to be perfect. What's that saying, that perfect is the enemy of good? And, just that thing of just get something out there. Your website can just be a landing page that you can direct people to. You can tweak it and improve it as time goes on. Don't overthink it, just get started. So I still remember the night that I'd finally designed it, did it all, myself, pressed the on button, and I was like, right, next day, all right, waiting for patients. Literally, right, next week, nobody. And I'm like, well, of course, nobody can see it. It's just, don't be so stupid. So yeah, I think that, and then realizing it's a slow burn. There's no such thing as overnight success. Overnight success has 7 to 10 years behind it.
Welcome to the H-Files, the new series of the Hands-On Business podcast, where we dive deep into the world of healthcare leadership and the unique challenges facing small to medium-sized healthcare businesses. I'm Hakeem Adebiyi, and after years of helping businesses grow in various industries, I'm excited to focus on the area that I know the best, healthcare, one of the most dynamic and impactful sectors in the world today. In this series, we're going to explore what it takes to lead and grow in healthcare, from navigating the complexities of regulation and innovation to overcoming the everyday hurdles of building a sustainable business in this fast-paced environment. Each episode will feature real-world insights, expert interviews, and actionable strategies that can help you push your healthcare business forward. So whether you're a leader in the space or an entrepreneur ready to break into it, the H-Files is here to give you the edge. A GP sat across from a patient who said to them, "I just feel stuck. I keep coming back, but nothing really changes." And the GP knew exactly what they meant. Not because the diagnosis was unclear, far from it. It's because after years of clinical experience, the causes of the patient's issues were obvious. But with just 10 minutes on the clock and a waiting room already overflowing, there was no real time to address the problems properly. And the only option was to hand out another prescription and another sticking plaster, effectively. And it's not a unique story. And for some doctors, it's the moment that they realise the system isn't broken, it's just not actually set up and designed to heal in the way it's formatted today. So today's guest, Dr. Becky Howie, reached that same crossroads, but instead of pushing down her frustration, she channeled it into something much more bold. And she left the churn of population-based healthcare and built Maldod Life, a business focused on deep, personalized well-being through coaching, lifestyle medicine, and time-rich care. And in this episode, Becky is going to share how she made that shift, what it takes to turn a clinical career into a purpose-led business, and how rethinking the model of care can open doors for both practitioners and patients. So thank you very much for coming on the show. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So we're going to get straight into it. When did you first feel like something had to change, and specifically within your GP practice? Was there a moment in your NHS career where you realised, actually, this is probably not sustainable for me anymore?
Yeah, I think it was probably quite gradual, but I think like a lot of people, the pandemic was probably a bit of a turning point of this can't carry on like this. I mean, I think as we all know, during the pandemic, the NHS struggled to provide care in the way that it always had done, understandably, and we can reflect on decisions made and debate whether they were correct or not, but they were made. But we've never managed to get things back to where they were. And I think that's for lots of reasons. But the big things, I think, is the world has changed. It was changing before the pandemic, but it's changed even faster. I think the NHS has not kept up with that change. And when I talk about change, I think people are used to instant access to everything. They can go online and order something and it's going to arrive even sometimes within a few hours if you live very centrally to that. We're not used to waiting lists anymore or waiting for procedures. And that's thinking about waiting times being what they were even before the pandemic. And we all know they're much, much worse now. Patients don't expect to get healthcare the way it's being delivered. They expect much faster healthcare, and for digitalization of healthcare as well. The very fact that I'm in Scotland still physically signing prescriptions, there's a lot of stuff that could really make big changes to all of that. I think I more and more was seeing that the actual system wasn't working for people, but more than that, the people sitting in front of me were desperate change, for insight into what was actually going wrong, but I just did not have the time to give them what they needed. And I think I started to explore an area of medicine called lifestyle medicine, which is all about the kind of pillars of how we live and how our health and our behaviors affect our well-being and our health. So it focuses down on things like nutrition, physical activity, stress management, risky substances, social connections, and sleep. And they're the kind of main things that we focus on. And if you think about it, a lot of modern life has kind of eroded those pillars into basically, towers of dust. We're struggling. People aren't sleeping. They're busier than ever, totally addicted to digital phones and social media and all of that. And there's so much there that is affecting our health. But on top of that, we also now have this huge amount of information for patients to try and navigate through online. What's true, what's not, who's selling me a product, who's not selling me a product. Even I struggle with it. We were just mentioning about LinkedIn. My inbox is full of companies selling me the next best thing that's going to fix everything. And, it's really hard, even with my scientific brain, to wade through the nonsense versus the kind of decent clinical stuff. So I think I could see that patients are out there exploring, wanting to know how to hack their health, and we are just not doing that justice in the NHS, and we're not really helping them with that. So I think it was all of that I knew I had to take a jump and see where it landed. And the more I immersed myself in that lifestyle medicine world, the more I just sat there getting frustrated about 10 minutes and feeling like I just had to give somebody a prescription rather than really exploring what was going on for them. So yeah, it was a gradual creeping in of just feeling more and more dissatisfied with the kind of care I was able to provide.
It's a really interesting that, because I come from a different side of healthcare, because I come from the pharmaceutical market, and actually one of the reasons I left the pharmaceutical market was similar to what you've just said. Obviously I'm not treating people, but it was very much about, when I started looking at most big blockbuster pharmaceutical drugs, if you change your lifestyle, you wouldn't need those drugs, the diabetes, the cardiovascular, asthma in some respects. And it's counterintuitive to the pharmaceutical market to actually give that advice, because for them, the holy grail is getting someone on who's a child, who's then going to be on it for the rest of their life, because that's in the patient for life. What you were saying there really resonated with me in terms of that slow erosion of, actually, could I help in a better way and a more effective way than being a GP, which is a really sad indictment of the NHS, to be honest. Because when I was growing up, that being a GP, being a hospital doctor, etc., was like the panacea of, we're going to dedicate our life to helping people. And what you're saying is, actually, as a GP, you didn't feel that you could actually help the people in the way they needed to be helped.
Yeah. I wanted to be a doctor from the age of 3. Like, that was just a life ambition. I don't know where it came from, but I used to walk around with my, Fisher Price doctor's kit, fixing everybody. I've always wanted to help people. But I do think that people need help in lots of ways, and it's not just about a drug. I sometimes say, and I'm sure other people have said it before, that I think the NHS is a wonderful thing, but it focuses on sick care, not healthcare. So we're treating sickness, we're not enabling health. And health is not just the absence of disease, it's the actual, I think World Health Organization have a really good quote, which I can't remember, but it's effectively that health is not just the absence of disease, it's about thriving, it's about well-being, happiness, joy, the stuff that we all really want for our lives. But, unfortunately, our modern society is kind of pushing that and making that harder and harder to achieve.
Yeah, 100%. So it's been gradual. You've wanted to be a doctor since you were 3. So what was that mind shift like, to going from something you've always done, always wanted to do, to then launching your own business, which I get is in health, and it's obviously hopefully going to have the same outcomes. But what made you believe that Maldod Life could actually work, not just clinically, because obviously you've just explained why it's definitely going to work clinically, but also commercially, because it's a business, isn't it?
Well, I think, again, sadly, it's because the state the NHS finds itself in, that people are looking for help and they're not finding it where they used to be able to find it. And again, I'm not here to moan about the NHS, but it didn't matter. I got to a stage where it didn't matter how good I was at my job, how good diagnostically I was at picking up that, somebody did have a disease state. I then couldn't get them the investigations for 6 months, a year. You just knew that their health was just going to deteriorate during that period of time. And I think it was that sense that this isn't going to get better quickly. And maybe selfishly, I was like, well, I'm in my mid 40s. I've probably got 20 more years of work ahead of me. Do I want to cling on to what feels like a sinking ship that's hit an iceberg and be the last person on it? Or do I want to start to be somebody who's put together a life raft that is going to help people to improve their health? And there's a lot of metaphor that I've just thrown in there. Sounds very negative, but that's how it feels. I think that's how it feels for a lot of people. And it's really sad that it does. But the problem is that as somebody who's always worked for a big organization that has a lovely pension, that takes care of you if you get sick, that, there's no doubt about it. Yes, that we have a problem in the workforce and morale is low, but the benefits of being an NHS employee are really good. And to give them up is like, going back to that little analogy of the Titanic, is taking off your life vest and getting into something that you don't know whether it's going to float or not. So I think that's what is difficult, is being in a position where you say, right, I'm going to take the risk, because it is giving up that kind of comfort and security, if you like. But it's like, is the security worth feeling unhappy in what you're doing every day? And it just got to a stage where I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate enough. We have two incomes in our household, so I appreciate that not everybody's in that position, and I get that. But you do get used to two incomes as well, and you get used to two nice incomes and two nice pensions. But there is always that part of me that thinks, your pension's important, but who's to say I'm still going to be here at 65? Well, I want to live now. I want to live in the here and now and enjoy every day and feel like I'm making a difference for people. And so that was a good way of kind of pushing it. Not that I mean, we'll dig into it, but I definitely planned before I actually went, including making sure that I wasn't leaving my colleagues in a sticky position either. So, it was good 18 months of my decision being made before I actually walked out the door. So it takes time to kind of to come to all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's very good advice, actually, in terms of there's lots of different pieces of advice. People say, oh, well, just give it all up. If you're not happy, just give it all up today and go and do it. Now, that's very brave advice. It's not advice I would give, because I think, like you, I think you want to make sure that you're certainly financially in a position that you can do what needs to be done. I know some people say, oh, well, yeah, but if there's a burning platform, then you work harder. You probably work harder, but you're probably a lot more stressed, and you're probably less likely to make the right considered decisions, because there is a burning platform. I think being able to financially sustain yourself for a year is what I always have in my mind, 6 months to a year at least, so that you can say, well, actually, I've got a bit of time to actually make some mistakes, get a better understanding of what's happening, and make the right decisions. I think is very sage advice. So actually think about it before you do. Don't just jump off. I'm trying to think of another analogy, but don't just jump off the plank. Actually think about it
Make sure
before you do it.
your lifeboat has enough air in it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, exactly. Make sure the life rafts have enough air in it. Yeah, because otherwise, you know what's going to happen. So obviously, I'm sure that you probably know other clinicians who have thought about it, but then have decided not to do it for whatever reason, and then you've got other people who will have done it. What's the biggest fear that you had or still have about not being, apart from the pension, not being in the NHS and now being, effectively running your own business and driving your own destiny?
It's a funny one, because I think I'd like to say this wasn't the case, but one of the big things that probably still chips away at me and for other people is, what do people think of me for doing it? And I think
Okay,
that's
yeah.
a big thing. Like, people feel guilty about moving into the private sector, as if the NHS owns us and we must die at the altar of the NHS because it is this wonderful thing in it. One of the things that I found interesting on LinkedIn was some people would jump in and say things like, well, we've trained you and that people should be staying. And I think, I've done 20 years. Like, even if I was in the military, I'd be allowed to leave, So I think 20 years is long enough to decide it's time to go. So I think it's partly, there's a sense, and I think it's changing, and it's certainly changing among the patients that I do deal with, is that I'm not doing it for the money. Like, I think people
Mm.
think private healthcare, that's about people wanting to make loads of money. And maybe traditionally, years and years, decades ago, that was what it was about. But I think more and more now, it's about people wanting to provide healthcare in the way that they believe is the right way to provide healthcare. and you just can't do it that way in the NHS. You can try, and you can try and be a trailblazer, and you can try to get involved in projects, and there's some brilliant stuff that's coming out, but they're often only 2 or 3 years at a time. And I've had loads of colleagues that have been involved in really, significant um, projects, but the funding they have to reapply for every single year. There's not that definite that this brilliant pilot is going to continue. And that's really frustrating when you're always kind of just waiting to see, you're at the mercy of somebody else as to whether or not what you've poured your heart into is going to continue. And I know in your own business that's the same, but you're at least in control of whether it's going to continue, not somebody saying, oh no, we're pulling the funding for that. Yeah, I forgot what you actually asked me there, sorry.
No, it was just about the fears that you had.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I think it's about what people think of you. It's about, will I find enough patients? Will enough people want to come? You know, will I build a reputation that isn't just about poor medicine, like making sure that your indemnity, we're under a law for a lot of the GMC, your indemnity insurance, all of that kind of stuff. You just want to make sure you're doing it correctly. You never want to be seen as somebody who's a bit, far out there by themselves, that nobody else would think that what you're doing is safe. So I think it's all those sort of things. But I think the very fact you worry about it probably means you're doing it correctly.
I think that's it, and I do have sympathy for anyone in the NHS actually, because if I do an MBA, for example, or any other sort of study, then yes, they would expect me to stay in that business for a certain period of time, probably about 18 months. There wouldn't be sort of like 15, 20 years in saying, oh, well, you still need to stay. You remember, 20 years ago, we trained you. So you haven't really returned. Because it's like, well, how long do I have to stay in a business or in a situation or in a job where actually I've been unhappy for quite some time? Because if you're unhappy, you're probably less likely to be doing as good a job as you were when you were happy. And I think everybody deserves to be in a role or in a job where actually they're energized, they're happy, especially when you're dealing with patients, because you want to be the best version of yourself when you're dealing with patients, rather than you're trying to do the job, but you can't do what you really need for that patient. I think it's very short-sighted what people like that are saying, and actually the people they should be really targeting is the government rather than the individuals, because you're just an individual working in a system that is probably a bit broken, and we should be focusing on, well, how do we fix it? And because if you fix it, then everyone, not everyone, but much more people will stay in the NHS. I don't know many people who leave the NHS singing and dancing, saying, "Oh, it's great! Thank God I'm leaving the NHS." It's a very, because I've got quite a lot of doctors in the family, and I know that it's a very painful process, because I've got some people who've moved abroad, I've got people who are still in the NHS, and nobody I know has ever taken that decision lightly. It's a very difficult decision to make, because most people in England who go into the NHS go in because they want to help people, and they love the NHS because of the way that we're set up, and it is very depressing when you see that actually you can't deliver what's required. So that's just my little two pence worth. So in terms of now talking a bit more about Maldod Life, so what are the lessons that you think you've learned so far, because you're new into it? What the lessons you've learned, what you're enjoying about this process, and where you are now?
I think the first lesson, and it probably sounds really funny, anybody who's been in business for a while, is that it just doesn't happen overnight. I remember making my little website. So I did it all by myself to begin with, because I went to a couple of talks, and, people like, it doesn't need to be perfect. What's that saying, that perfect is the enemy of good? And, just that thing of just get something out there. Your website can just be a landing page that you can direct people to. You can tweak it and improve it as time goes on. Don't overthink it, just get started. So I still remember like the night that I'd finally designed it, did it all, myself, pressed the on button, and I was like, right, next day, all right, waiting for patients, like literally, right, next week, nobody. And I'm like, well, of course, it's not, no, nobody can see it. Like, it's just, don't be so stupid. So yeah, I think that, and then realizing it's a slow burn. There's no such thing as overnight success. Overnight success has 7 to 10 years behind it. You hear musicians talk about that in exactly the same way, that the media will portray them as an overnight success, but they've been chipping away for a long, long time before they've had that final kind of movement. So I think it was that. I think you learn an awful lot of vocabulary that I'm still learning about. It's a whole language. You think medicine's a language, business is a language, sales funnels and all sorts of stuff. And then I think also don't fall for people selling you their product. So I think when you're early out, particularly very naive, like a lot of doctors, like I was a GP partner. So in a way, you have this weird, you do run a business, but you don't run a business.
Mm.
You have this business, but you can't, so you're in charge of your salaries of your staff and different things, but there's not a lot of ways to make more revenue, so it's a kind of weird system. So you've got a little bit of business knowledge but not real business knowledge. And what you suddenly find is, you type in a couple of things onto your phone, and before you know it, your social media is like, are you a health tech new business? Buy our products of 12-week, we'll get you up and running, we'll get you seen. I mean, everybody is constantly telling me how they're going to get my website seen, on Google it doesn't appear, and da 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 da. And I'm like, thank you so much for pointing that out from across the world. I know that. I'm okay with that. I'm not even sure I could handle the amount of people if it was seen an awful lot. I'm chipping away and doing okay for myself at the moment. Thank you very much. So I think it's not remembering that other people are trying to sell you stuff just like you're trying to sell to people too. So I think that was probably early lessons, and that you don't need to just buy everything. Like I think you can be really tempted to think, oh, well, I need this, 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 this. And actually, like, well, do I really need that right now? Or can that wait until there's a bit of money coming in? Can I hold off getting my own business phone? We're talking small scale, like you said, this is small businesses, literally just you, so it's, do I need to buy the Calendly full pro thing, or can I get by on the free one for a bit? Because the temptation is just to jump in with the best product immediately, but actually maybe the free one is okay for a little bit. And so, yeah, I think that would be my early lessons, really.
And I think that's really, really good advice, because and it's not just because you haven't had business experience. I've had lots of business experience, and the amount of money I've spent on different things. SEO is one of them that people are always, and then you think, oh, SEO, I've got a YouTube channel. I'll be able to get you thousands of views on your YouTube. You think, oh, that's great for the podcast. And then you start looking at the views and you're thinking, yeah, having those 10,000 people in Taiwan and India is not really my target demographic. So I think you're definitely right. I think a really good rule of thumb is actually just before you pay, take a step back, have a look. How much do I need this? And what is this what I need, as you just said, at the moment? Because nowadays you can pretty much build fully functioning everything business. You spend a lot of money, and then you think, well, I don't need that, and 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 it does make sense to build up slowly but surely. And one of the things you said earlier was about patience and understanding that actually things don't come overnight. So if they don't come overnight, then it doesn't make sense for you to be trying to do everything overnight as well, because that what puts most businesses out of business is a cash flow. And if you're spending loads of money on other things, but you're not bringing all the money in, then you're going to hit a wall quite quickly. So I think that is very, very wise and sage advice for anyone who's listening and thinking about doing it, or is currently doing it. So in terms of, the lifestyle medicine, and you're doing group consultations, so that's when people are thinking about private health and private health models, that's quite an unusual thing to get into. So in your mind, how do you feel that is a scalable business that's going to actually deliver what you require in terms of not just being able to help your patients, but also have a viable business?
I think starting with the group stuff, I think I do a lot of menopause work and midlife health, and particularly women, but men as well. But women particularly work really well in groups together. I think they've been used to doing that throughout their lives. At different stages in life, women will often be grouped together, even when you think about pregnancy classes and antenatal care and things like that. So they're more used to being sociable, talking about what's happening. And what I find is that they learn so much from each other as well as from me, that it's a really lovely environment that you build. And you need to make sure that you govern it, and you are kind of cautious that everybody understands what it's going to mean. Some people, if you're a bit of an introvert, that type of environment might not work for you. But I think that groups, it also makes it cheaper for the person. So, you can charge less to doing a group. and it's very time efficient for you as the coach or the clinician or whatever it is that you're doing. So I think it really benefits in lots of respects. I think the temptation sometimes is to, so I guess my target are the people that have not got loads and loads of money. It's the people that just really need help. So it's trying to find a way to reach them in a way that they can afford, and then scaling that is a great way to do that is in groups, because you can charge less for your 1 hour shared amongst 5 people is a lot less than one to one, and it probably is a little bit less intense for you as a person as well. Back to back one to one is quite exhausting, whereas there's something about the group dynamic that's really helpful. From the lifestyle perspective, I think patients are interested in this now because of social media, hacking everything, longevity stuff, gummies for this, herbs for that, powders for this. I think there's a genuine interest. People want to feel better. They are tired. They want to know how to improve their health. So I think there is an interest. And I think if you are a legitimate person showing up in that world and you have qualifications and what you say makes sense, and you're not trying to sell them a product as such, you're selling them you as a person. That's kind of, I guess, what I'm doing. It does seem to work quite well, and people do seem to engage with it. And a lot of people just need some accountability, some support, somebody to just offload a little bit too. So if you can be that for them as well, that can be really therapeutic, just having time with people.
Well, I think it's. I'm not going to say it's 100% unique, but it seems relatively unique to me because there seems to be lots of people who are doing lifestyle stuff and they've got no medical qualifications. And sometimes I'm looking at them thinking, so what is it? What qualification have you got that means that you can help me with my lifestyle and my health and all those things? And it's like, well, I'm a personal trainer, so great. So you can get me physically fit, but that's slightly different thing to what you're doing. So I think it is actually quite a niche market what you're doing. And so in terms of patient outcomes, because I had someone on my podcast the other day, and allegedly I think it was the guy from Merck. I can't remember he's the grandfather. I can't remember his name, but he basically said that if you take care of the patient, then if you take care of the patient, then the finances will take care of themselves. So from what you're seeing, I know it's early days, but are you seeing a more fulfilling patient outcome from what you're seeing than when you were in the NHS?
Certainly from my side of the table, yes. Like I feel like the encounters just feel really positive. And I think a lot of the kind of more medical stuff that I'm doing via a clinic that does collect data. So they've got Doctify and it's 5 stars across the board, which is amazing. But they even say, you see people leave the room and they're happy. They feel like they've been heard, listened to. And that's just maybe because you're giving them 30 minutes, an hour, but you're not sort of saying one problem only, 10 minutes at a time. You're like, well, let's put you in, and they come back. So it has to be working if they come back, and they're not coming back because I'm trying to sell them more. Like one of the things I keep saying to people is I want to get you the best value for your money. So if we're going to focus on, so sometimes it might be somebody's wanting to look at, there's a family history of health issues. So I'm like, well, let's dive into those particular things that are more likely going to affect you, then look at everything that could possibly cause you problems. And let's focus on how we improve those kind of risk factors and how we, what the science and the evidence is behind that. And they value that, because I'm like, well, we could spend hours going through every single risk factor out there. But if we really hone in on what is worrying you, and I think one of the key things that I'm realizing is just to start to understand what is it that the patient's worried about? What is the thing they think they've got that they just cannot get satisfied until somebody says to them, you don't have that. It's okay. Because they chase after and again, with those quick consultations at work in the NHS, it's like the sticky plaster. You don't even have time to really explore properly what their fears are and what their worries are. So just opening that up to people and giving them time makes a big difference.
So when you're doing your one-to-ones, are you still prescribing, or are you not?
So yeah, so the stuff I'm doing, so there's 2 different parts, I guess, to it, because obviously there's a lot of licensing and indemnity side of it. So I would say the stuff that's more doctory, I do through a clinic and I prescribe through there if they need to have a prescription. Whereas the stuff that's more about specifically just coaching, then I don't prescribe through that. An example might be a midlife woman. I might prescribe HRT because, I believe that can be really useful, but I'm also going to give them, stuff about, it's not just about hormones, like midlife, there's other things we need to approach here. So we need to look at nutrition, we need to look at activity, stress, all these kind of things. So what I've made sure is that within Maldod, I can push people down the funnel depending on what their needs are. So if it's more traditional medical and there's a chance they're going to need some sort of medication and prescribing, or they want a sort of a more in-depth health screening with blood tests and stuff, that's going to be done through the clinic. Whereas if it's more a kind of, they may come saying, I already know what's wrong, I want to be coached how I know what I need to do, I need help doing it, then that's a sort of different part to it. So it depends what their needs are. But I like the fact that Maldod allows me to do both, because I think there's space for both, really.
So you're probably too young to remember this, but what you're describing to me is what a family doctor used to do. And because I still remember the name, Dr. Linnell, who was our family doctor, and we'd probably all go in together. My mum would take us all three of the kids in, and we could be there for half an hour, going through, this is a problem, that's a problem. And what I really found, or when I reflect upon it, and I was just thinking about what you were saying, and you compare it to today, the doctor you saw was a proper family doctor, so he knew your family. So they already knew your history. Whereas my mum's named GP at the moment, I think she's 90. I think she's seen him once in about 5 years, and you can't get an appointment with him. And when you go in, it's like you're explaining to him again who you are, what your ailments are, and you're like, aren't you supposed to be a named GP? Whereas when I was younger, you'd go in and the doctor knew everything about you, basically, and your family, and you could have a proper conversation, and you did always feel, actually, I feel much better I've come out there because he's explained everything to me in the way that I understand. Whereas now when I go in, you say, I've got an ailment here, and then you say, oh, no, only one ailment per consultation. I'm like, yeah, no, but so I've got to make another appointment. I could just tell you, no, I can't, I'm sorry, because I've got a waiting room. So it just, as you were talking, it was just really just taking me back and thinking, actually, you're doing what the NHS was set up to do.
Definitely. I think that's the thing. And I mean, obviously, at the moment, I'm not necessarily getting to know their entire family, but, if they brought their entire family, would. But I think the degradation of community within society, families are splintered across places, and it is just how society has moved on, isn't it? That we've kind of lost, even back down to, we lived in communities where even if the priest knew people, or people knew who people were. And we have lost that. And people say, well, why does an NHS GP not work like that anymore? And I think the one thing that's changed is that the demand has gone up as well. So, people expect, I don't know, I imagine your mum, when she would have taken you all, would have only gone, you wouldn't have troubled the doctor about nonsense. You'd have only troubled, and I think that's changed. We've got now Google, Dr. Google, and people type in their symptoms and immediately think they've got a brain tumor, or I don't know. I remember my mum had this book called, I think it was called like Family Medicine. I used to love flicking through it. And it like, I mean, it would have like a chapter on chickenpox and what to do, and a chapter on sore throats and what to do. And that's what you did. You looked after yourself until it wasn't working anymore. But we don't seem to do that now. It's weird, even though we have got a wealth of information available to us at the tip of our fingertips, but it seems to make us panic, not soothe ourselves. Whereas the books, the atlases, the family health atlases, they would somehow, I don't know, it would be enough and you felt soothed. You also had Granny down the road, like wise Granny, newer stuff. She'd be like, don't, that's nonsense, that kid's got this. That's part of society just has disappeared. And I don't know why, like how it's happened, but somehow we don't have those, maybe we don't respect our elderly anymore. I don't know, but we seem to have lost that wisdom that used to kind of govern over families and help people make decisions.
I think it's a longer conversation. I have this conversation all the time with my kids, because even in the communities that we live in, if I look at when I was growing up, I knew every single neighbour. Everybody knew everybody else. Someone just moved in across the road, and I was saying to my wife, we need to, and they've been there for about a month, I think. I said, we need to go and say hello to them. And in the old days, you wouldn't even be a thought. You'd gone over the first day. And I can see that the things are changing, and I think that you're right. The way that people view the NHS, the way that people view doctors, the way that people view their own health has changed quite significantly, which is putting a lot of pressure into the system. And I think that what you're doing is almost, as I said, recreating the old NHS. And so because this is quite unique to me, I mean, do you know many other people who are doing this sort of thing?
There's definitely GPs who are marketing themselves as old school GPs. Do you know, like
Mm,
you
yeah.
definitely see that coming out. And so there are, again, I know one or two locally. I think this kind of, they're calling it concierge medicine, is what you probably see being picked up a lot on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Because ultimately it's what people want. They want to get a home visit if they need a home visit. They want to have that hour or so with somebody. But it would be foolish to think that the way the NHS is set up now, that you could ever create that. The number of people I would need to get through in a day to manage, and even then, not everybody's getting an appointment that needs an appointment. And I'd be having 60 encounters a day with people, and you think you can't
Mm.
do high quality for 60 people in in a 10-hour window. It's just it's just craziness. Yeah, there's this birth of concierge medical practice, and I think ultimately that is very similar to what the old kind of family doctor did. But yeah, you're right, we're less connected than ever before, and yet allegedly digitally more connected. Look at us, we can have this conversation, never met, but here we are, but you're not connected around the society and the people just on your doorstep.
And I think that's part of the challenge, because I think when I look at some of the youngsters, and it's not just youngsters, to be honest, lots of people will have lots of online meetings, or they're on WhatsApp, or they're on LinkedIn. And that's kind of replacing the face-to-face communication. And obviously I do lots of digital stuff, but I never want to replace the face-to-face connection, because you can't get the same relationship, you can't get the same feeling online as when you actually meet somebody and you actually sit next to them, or having a drink with them, or having a meal with them. It's just not the same at all. And I think, unfortunately, more and more people are opting for that and thinking, oh, well, yeah, but I speak to people all day, every day. And you're thinking, well, you're online all day, if that's what you mean. And I say it to my kids, it's like, when I was a kid, staying in my bedroom was like purgatory. Whereas now, for you, it's like, oh, it's great, I'm in my bedroom, or I'm on the PlayStation. I'm thinking, I wanted to get out. I wanted to get out with my friends and meet people and do stuff together. And I think there's definitely a balance in that makes you a happier, healthier person, actually.
Definitely, yeah.
So in terms of the balance that you have as a business person, because you're now a clinician, you're a coach, you're an entrepreneur, you're an advocate. I've seen you on TV advocating. So what's helped you try and stay grounded and get the balance right whilst you're running a mission-driven business?
I've got brilliant people around me. So my husband is incredibly supportive, and I think trying to do that without that support would be really difficult. Even the kids, they're dead supportive. But I think it's such a good example for them that you're never stuck, that you can always make changes, that it doesn't need to be perfect, that you can just step out and see where you land and not to be afraid of things. I think, yeah, it's about things I'm learning to do, because I'm not great at it yet. I've said yes to too many things at the beginning, because I think there's a fear. There's no, well, like if I don't say yes to this month, there might not be anything next month. So that's something I'm learning quite quickly, that I need to just pace myself better, because you then don't do a good job at any of it if you're trying to spread yourself too thin. So I think there's a big part of learning that it's okay to say no or not yet. Actually, even with these podcasts, I think I pushed you into the end of June, and
You
you
did.
know, because just because there was this one post I did on LinkedIn, and it went mental. Like the amount of inbox stuff, and the problem is, like, some of these connections are really great connections, and I don't want to miss those opportunities just because there's been too much all at once. So
Mm.
it's like we said already, it's about having patience. I think I'm trying to learn to shut the laptop and walk away from it, and if I end up at a weekend, if I'm doing a keynote or something like that on a Saturday, I'm taking Monday off in replacement of it. That rest is so important. And, it's easy to think, no, but like I'll rest when dot 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 dot, but when never comes, because there's always something. Well, hopefully, if things go well, there's always something new on the horizon. So I'm not perfect at it, but I'm getting better at it. I have to practice what I preach. If I'm telling people they need to be physically active, they need to be getting outside, they need to be connecting with people, I need to be doing those things as well. So I think it's just trying to really be quite disciplined in that respect, making sure I'm sleeping properly, making sure I'm not online, checking email before bed. I think while social media can be useful, there are periods where if you're early on in business, entrepreneur, you can compare yourself to other people who are ahead of you and it can make you feel like rubbish. And I think sometimes I will step away from those platforms that make me feel like that because they're not benefiting me. If I feel like that, then yeah, I get that you can learn stuff from what people are doing. But I think if you're not ready for that yet, you can also start to feel quite like you're not enough. And that's never a good position to be in either. So, yeah, it's kind of having these disciplines. Yeah, I'm not great at them. I know what I should be doing, but at least I'm trying.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about stepping away, because I know the best piece of advice I was ever given when I was, and to be honest, generally I'm quite lazy, so I took it. When I was a medical rep, my regional manager said to me, right, Hakeem, when you get into your house, that's your time. So she said, actually, use your car as the office. So when you go home, don't go straight into the house. Don't start doing everything that said. Finish everything you've got, all your paperwork, do it in the car. So that when you get into the house, you've got a separation between work time and your office time. And I've always, whatever job I've done, I've always done that. And I've said it to people who work for me. I said, I have a cut-off point. Yes, it doesn't mean that you can never work late, but if you're going to say 6 o'clock is your cut-off time, then the majority of the time you should say, right, as you said, I'm shutting the laptop, I'm going in the house, or I'm going out of my room, I'm shutting the office door, and I'm making sure that this is protected time. And especially during working from home and the COVID, that becomes even more important because everything merged into one. So you could quite easily get into a position where you're just working all the time. So I think that's really, really important advice, and actually try to work in exercise and all those sort of things into your daily routine to keep yourself alert and keep yourself fresh, because it is very easy when you start working yourself just to sit there on the laptop and just be working every hour God sends. And in terms of the social media, the funny thing about the social media is what I've noticed. I'm not saying everyone's a liar, but there's lots of people who they're posting all year saying how fantastic life is, and then all of a sudden they post about how they're depressed, how this is terrible, that, and you're thinking, right, so is what you've been posting all year the truth, or is what you're posting now the truth? Because the two things can't be, compatible. So I'm very, because we're all human. Then you see people who are doing better than yourself in your same field. You think, oh, how are they doing that? And then you think, actually, well, they might be and they might not be. But actually, you happy with what you're doing, and that's the main thing, I think, in terms of understanding where you're at, understanding where you wanted it to be at this point. And if you're achieving that, then I think that is pretty much good enough, rather than comparing yourself, because it is a lot easier to compare yourself to other people now with social media and people always saying how great everything is. I'm brilliant. I'm unbelievable. I started my business last week and I'm now turning over 10 million, and somebody else wants to buy me for 50 million. You're like, really? Okay.
Yeah. And yet you have
Good
all
luck.
this time to be on LinkedIn. That's the bit that always gets me. I'm like, how? So initially, it took me ages to work that one out. That I'm like, if you're posting every day, like, okay, you might have a marketing group that are doing that for you, fair enough. But actually, I don't have time to be on it, which I think is good. I think that's successful. Like, I'm like, oh, flipping heck, I'm not putting anything on for ages because I'm too busy, which is a good thing. And my favorite saying is comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that
I
is
like that.
it's good, and it's not mine. I can't remember who it's from, but it's brilliant. I think I might put it on my gravestone because for any walk of life, whether it's about how you look, about how bright you are, whether your business is successful, your family, and whether your kids behave like other people's kids. If you look at social media and believe that you start to think yours are the only kids who can't sit in a restaurant, or yours are the only kids who, and actually, like, one of the things that I talk a lot with women about in midlife is that, there are some brilliant celebrities, shall we say, who are pushing forward women's health, pushing forward, menopause and all of this, but they're not real. They are put together by a team. They have a lot of help to look the way they look. So I'm like, compare yourself to the people in Asda. That's who people look like, and I think that's a problem with social media, is that it's so polished. But go out on the street, look at what people look like. What are people's bodies like? What are, people like in their families and interactions and in their relationships? That's reality. And so if you're always comparing yourself to this polished view of things, you're only going to end up feeling not good enough. So
And I think, I think it's causing a mental health epidemic in young kids, because the amount of when I was a kid, I'm not saying you obviously you thought about what you look like, but nowadays it's like 16, 17-year-old people getting Botox, having facelifts. And I'm thinking, you're in the prime of your life. So if you're doing that now, what's going to happen when you're 40, 50? You know, you're going to be unrecognizable, and some of them are unrecognizable. And you're thinking, that to me shows that there must be a serious problem, because to change your face completely, I understand something you got reconstructive. There's certain things that you might. There are definitely things that you're thinking, actually, I do need to change that. But it's like you're seeing people who are very attractive already in the traditional sense, and then all of a sudden they're changing everything. Thinking, what on earth have you done? So you're spending all that money, and it's because, as you said, they're comparing themselves to models on TV. You know, every man wants to have a six-pack these days. I've always gone to the gym, but not particularly seriously, to be honest. I do a lot of cycling, so I do it to keep fit for that. And the amount of young lads are in there now pumping, to just get big. And you're thinking, you're like 14, 15. What are you doing in the gym? Just go out and run around a bit, and you'll be healthy. I find it really, really worrying, actually. And I don't ever mention to my kids actually anything about their appearance, because I'm so terrified that I don't want to give them any sort of complex about anything, because I think that there's a real pervasive streak in society now where actually you have to be perfect. Everything has to be perfect. Your teeth have to be perfect. Your nose has to be perfect. Everything. And it's like, you can never live up to that ideal. And as you said, all the people on the TV or the model, you're thinking, they don't get out of bed and look like that, I can assure you.
And they don't look like that either. We then slag them off when they've become an older person, and you think, it's crazy. Pamela Anson's a perfect example. There she is, looking like a normal woman of, I can't remember how old she is now, like mid-50s, early 60s. She just looks like, she looks great. She looks like a 55, 6-year-old, whatever age she is. But everybody's slagging her, and it's like, why should she still look like she did when she was in Baywatch? It's like, it's just mad.
Because I would have always said that the pressure on women is worse, which it is. But the pressure on men, because there never used to be any pressure on men.
No.
But all of a sudden, there's loads of pressure. The amount of men I'm seeing now are like doing the teeth, doing the pecs, I'm thinking, wow, yeah. So I was like, when did this happen? And because I always used to say to people, I said, I want to grow old gracefully, because I said, I've never seen anybody look at an old person who's natural and say, oh, look at him. Why have you got wrinkles? But I've seen a lot of people who've pointed at a man or a woman who's got very obvious work done, and they're pointing on, look, have you seen? And I'm thinking, you cannot hold back the strand of time. You just have to, which is exactly what you're doing, I think, is you just have to try and be healthy.
Yeah.
Because your body and your face tends to tell the story of your life, to be honest. And if you're healthy and you keep yourself in shape and you eat well, then you probably will, when you're 50, 60, look relatively healthy, rather than abusing your body and then just thinking I can rectify it by going under the knife or getting Botox or whatever else it may be.
And everybody looks the same as well, don't they? Like that terrible Love Island program that sadly my teenage daughter likes to watch, and I'm like, it's just this vacuous emptiness of people, and they all look the same, and it's just like, what are we doing? And like, oh man, I've tried to ban it, but it doesn't seem to happen.
I've never watched it. It's amazing how it's amazing how popular it is. The amount of people that I would never have thought would watch it, who say, oh, do you watch Love Island? I'm thinking, do you watch it? Oh yeah, I'm addicted. I'm like, really?
Car crash. It's that car crash. Like, there is an element of watching it because it's so awful that you just get drawn into it. But oh my goodness, yeah. But they all look the same. They're all like, the men are all six packs and with loads of swagger and loads of attitude, but really not very nice people. And the women are all like pumped up to the max and fake everything. And you just think, oh my goodness, what are we doing? What is going on?
I don't know. We're getting a bit sidetracked, but it doesn't matter.
I know, we sound like the old grumpy people who are like, youth of today.
I know. It's. I'm sure our parents said exactly the same about us. To be honest, it was just something else. So, on that note, finally, because we have come to the end of our time, I can't believe it. But so, if you were giving advice to a healthcare professional who was feeling stuck or burned out, what would be one small, and it doesn't have to be just healthcare professionals, because there's lots of people, but this podcast is for healthcare professionals. But what's one small but powerful shift that you think that they could make this week that could lead them to start building a different life for themselves? Big question, I know.
Yeah, I think first thing is probably they have a really unique skill set that is not recognised enough. That if you've worked in healthcare and in the NHS particularly for a long time, you have developed skill sets that are really transferable into loads of different things. So not to think that all you can do is be a doctor. Like, yes, you could still be a doctor or a nurse in a different setting, but even just those skills can transfer into other businesses really, really well. So there's that. And I think that change is possible. Like, it is scary, but you are not stuck, and you only get so many spins round the sun. So go for it. Like, don't be afraid. Plan it, think it through. The other big thing I would say is you probably are spending more money than you need to keep yourself happy. And actually, if you sat down and had a really hard look at your finances, you'd realize that there's an awful lot of money spent just to work and also to try and pay back for your misery if you're unhappy. So the holidays, the stuff you buy, the goods you constantly buy in to try and make yourself feel happier, you could actually strip a lot of that back if day to day just felt better. So I think, yeah, having a good look at your finances, getting real about where your money's going, and then being brave and taking the jump.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Becky Howie. It's been an illuminating hour. And I want to get you back on in about a year or two's time, if you're up for it, to chart your progress, because you're very early on in your journey. I have only positive thoughts about what you're going to deliver, having spoken to you for this past, 52 minutes. Because I think that business success comes from several things. One of them is actually having the right attitude. That's probably the biggest one, which you definitely have. And the second one is actually having something that is on offer that people need. And you've definitely got that as well. So thanks very much for coming on, and let's do it again further down the line.
Brilliant. We can put the world to rights again.
Yeah, exactly. What an illuminating conversation with Dr. Becky Howie. I really enjoy speaking to people who are right at the beginning of their entrepreneurial and business journey. And the three key things that I wanted to pick up on that Becky said that have really helped her, and I think is good advice to any new entrepreneur, any new business, is number one, have a support network around you, because that is important at all times, but especially when you're in one of those difficult, challenging times. Number two, prepare for that entrepreneurial journey, because there's lots of things that you need to understand. You need to make sure that you've tested your value proposition. You need to know that you've got enough finance and runway to be able to manage that business successfully. So preparation is key. And Becky said that she took about 18 months from decision that she was going to do the business to actually starting it. And the last one is about patience, because everybody becomes an entrepreneur or goes into a new business and thinks, yeah, we're going to be making loads of money within 2 or 3 months and we're going to have loads of clients. That may well happen, but then again, it may not. And we have to remember that business is a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to prepare for that marathon,